Brian Kelly met with reporters on Monday to preview Clemson week, and obviously he knows what they're up against heading up to Clemson this week.
This is going to be a great challenge, one that we're excited about, one that we're up for. Any goal that you put out there, it's not worthwhile unless it's a challenge. And so this will be a great challenge that our kids are excited about.
It's interesting that being out at fall camp all throughout this offseason, you go around LSU, and everything Brian Kelly said is true. Everything is 1-0 all over. They have a big logo that they've had on the screens at the indoor facility. It was on the screens in Tiger Stadium on Saturday. You walk into the team room at LSU where Brian Kelly has his media availability. Immediately to the left, there's 15 placards where the LSU schedule would be, the 12 regular season games, SEC championship, playoff, national championship, all that stuff. They're all covered except one, which is just Clemson on August 30th. I mean, they have been so singularly focused on this game. And y'all know I've talked up this team a lot, this LSU team, because of the talent that they brought in and returning Garrett Nussmeier. I think this is a playoff team. I think this is a double-digit win team. This is a massive challenge, though. And I could go position by position across the board and give you a favorable matchup toward LSU, except for one. And we all know which one it is. It's the offensive line. And we've talked about it ad nauseum because you're replacing 4 guys that were drafted into the NFL, including Will Campbell, who went 4th overall. Your only returning starter is DJ Chester, and he's not going to be your center this year. That's going to be Braylon Moore. So you're going to have 5 starters in new spots when you go take on Clemson. A Clemson team, which, by the way, has a couple of potential All-Americans on their defensive line. One on the inside, one at end. And a team that returns the lion's share of its talent from a year ago. 16 starters back for Clemson this year, the most returning production of any team in college football. And so I look at the offensive line, and that's my one gigantic question. Can your offensive line communicate to be more efficient and effective in the running game and keep Garrett Nussmeier upright? If the answer is to the affirmative of those 2 questions, then I think LSU could go to Clemson, and I think they could cakewalk through Clemson. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen, but if LSU is able to effectively run the ball and keep Garrett Nussmeier upright, there's too much talent all over the field for any defense to be able to handle and limit and stop this LSU offense. There's just too much talent everywhere. But that is a gigantic if that we haven't seen. And it's a massive ask to go on the road in a true road environment to be able to do this with 5 new starters on the offensive line. And if Brian Kelly was asked, if they're going to name a starting 5 and go with those 5 this Saturday against Clemson, and the answer flatly is no.
Yeah, I don't know that you always need a static 22. You don't want everybody in a position where you're rotating every single player. But there will be a couple of positions where we'll have some rotation, and I think it will be good for us. I think it makes us better. And so, we look at different battles, right? We're going to play a number of defensive ends and defensive tackles. It's because we'll be better because of it. I think the same thing would be true on the offensive line. You're going to see more than just 5 guys out there. You'll see, at least 6 or 7, could be as many as 8 offensive linemen playing for us.
I mean, it is fair to say we know you're going to see Tyree Adams and DJ Chester, Braylon Moore, Josh Thompson, Weston Davis, Paul Mabenga, Carius Kern, possibly Cohen Eccles. And, I understand Brian Kelly saying rotation can be a good thing. And on the defensive line, I wholeheartedly agree with him. Because when you have a rotation without a drop-off, then you're keeping fresh bodies while their offensive line is out there every snap. That's true. Like, the best defensive line rotation I've ever seen at LSU was 2011. They probably had 11 guys that rotated in on that defensive line. I mean, you could go from Mingo and Montgomery to LeVar Edwards and Chancey Agayeri, a bunch of fifth-year dudes that, look, those guys weren't first-round picks, but they had played a ton of football, and they were really good. Like, this, excuse me, I sneezed. This team has great depth on the defensive front. They have 5 guys, I would say, at defensive tackle. They're going to rotate without much drop-off. Like, I don't know that there's a ton of difference from Don McKinley to Ahmad Bro to Bernard Gooden to Jacobian Guillory to Sadir Mitchell. Like, you got 5 dudes that are going to rotate, maybe even 6 if you throw Shone Washington in there as well, where there's not a giant drop-off. A year ago, Jacobian Guillory was your best guy, and there was a massive drop-off to number 2. Guillory got hurt, and you were just gutted. Last year at end, you were really good with Jones and Swinson. I mean, there was a point early in the season where Braden Swinson was trending towards setting the LSU single-season sack record. But after those 2 guys, it was a massive drop-off to freshman Gabe Relaford and Deshaun Womack, who was no good against the run. You couldn't put him out there. Now you're talking about Patrick Payton with your 2s. You guys got 40 career TFLs. You get the point. I agree rotating on the defensive line can be a good thing. I don't know that I agree with that on the offensive line. You want continuity. They didn't rotate on the offensive line a year ago. When your starters were out there, you were settled with those really experienced dudes who played a bunch. You didn't say, oh, this would be a good thing to rotate. No, you want the continuity of having those guys out there. But you don't have that this year. You're still trying to identify who your best 5 in what spot is. And truthfully, you won't know that until they go play a game. Now, Brian Kelly was asked about specifically Mabenga, Chester, and Eccles, the 3 guys that are kind of all competing. We know Josh Thompson is starting at one guard spot. The question is who's at the other, and those are the 3 guys who are competing for it.
Paul actually moves very well for us, right? He can handle movements. He's been more consistent from that standpoint. DJ, you love the fact that he played so much football for you last year. He is in a new position if he is at the guard position from the center position, but we like his size, we like his smarts, we like his experience. And then with Cohen, he's physically strong. So if you get into a one-on-one matchup against an elite defensive tackle, he can hold his own physically. And so each one of them brings a little bit to the table, if you will, and that's why most likely you're going to see them all playing.
You would love to have one of those guys establish themselves. I will say this about Paul Mabenga. When he went in when Garrett Dellinger got hurt in that A&M game, his grade in that game was a 49. He got his first start against Alabama, unenviable. He went this is PFF, 43 rating against Alabama, 45 against Florida, 54 against Vanderbilt, 60 against Oklahoma. So once he became the starter every week, he got incrementally better. How much better year 1 to year 2 is a big question. But I will say this. Having Braylon Moore at center is a massive help. It's the most important position on the offensive line. It's the one that makes the calls, touches the football, every single play, is the battery. And you have an incredibly gifted center. That's huge. I will also say, in the name of fairness, for all the talent Clemson has on their defense, last year, they were not great defensively. This is the part of the narrative of the conversation that hasn't been told much. A year ago, Clemson was 84th in the country in rush defense. Do you realize that? 134 teams in the FBS. Clemson was 84th against the run. They allowed 160 yards a game, 4.7 yards per carry. How about sacks? That Clemson defensive front was 26th in the country in sacks. They had 35 sacks on the season. They were 26th. You know who's 27th? LSU had 34 sacks. 1 fewer sack. By the way, Clemson played an extra game because they had to play in the ACC championship game. All that to say, yes, there's a lot of talent on that Clemson defensive front. But they didn't play great a year ago. How much better are they this year is a big question. New defensive coordinator Tom Allen. How quickly can this LSU offensive line assimilate together? It's a mighty big ask. Do it on the road and see if they can Saturday. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.